The following program is a podcast1.com production.
Your healthy radio addiction starts now.
Power to the people!
The Laura Ingraham Show.
Welcome to the Laura Ingraham Show, your healthy radio addiction. I'm John Hinderacher from Powerline, filling in for Laura today. We're going to have a great show. We've got some terrific guests lined up, and of course there's a lot to talk about. We're going to be talking about the DACA negotiations that are ongoing, about the threat of a government shutdown if the Democrats decide to pursue that course. We're going to be talking about the war between President Trump and his administration on one hand, and the Democrats in the House and the Senate and the press corps on the other. And we're going to be talking about the S-hole controversy, which I'm afraid is unavoidable. And honestly, I don't know. Maybe we got somebody in my earphones who's familiar with these regulations by the FCC. Can we say S-hole on the air? I'm not sure. I don't really want to, honestly. I mean, I saw somewhere where CNN used that word 150 times, something like that, in the course of 24 hours, because they're gleefully parroting Dick Durbin's line, likely false. But of course the press jumped on it with both feet. But I don't really want to use that word. It's not the way I would normally talk, probably. I think I'll just refer to it as the S-hole controversy. We'll be talking about that from time to time over the course of the show. Unfortunately, it just can't be avoided. But I want to start with something a little bit different. I want to start by talking about yesterday's press briefing by Dr. Ronnie Jackson, the Navy physician who administers physicals to the president. And they actually broadcast live his press briefing yesterday when he appeared before the White House press corps to report on his findings when he did a physical examination of President Donald Trump. And, of course, what he found was that the president is as healthy as a horse. You know, he's, 70, whatever. But he's obviously going very, very strong. And Dr. Jackson, who I think I read he's an admiral. He looks too young to be an admiral, but he's obviously a high-ranking physician in the United States Navy, and did a very impressive job yesterday at this press briefing. And, of course, the Democrats are bitterly disappointed that Donald Trump looks poised to live through his first term in office and a second one, should he be reelected by the voters. But, of course, we all knew what was coming. We all knew that the only thing that the White House press corps was going to be interested in was is Trump senile? Is he suffering from dementia? Is he crazy? Is he mentally ill? And of course, ironically, normally, as Dr. Jackson told the reporters, he would not normally have administered a cognition test, a mental function test to President Trump, whom he has interacted with and who is obviously perfectly fine, very sharp, and so on. He wouldn't normally have done it. There were no indications for it. But he said that President Trump insisted that he administer a mental cognition test as part of the physical. And the president scored 30 out of 30. He got a perfect score on the mental cognition test, and that, of course, was reported by Dr. Ronnie Jackson in his press briefing yesterday. And that, too, was a source of severe frustration to the White House reporters, who view it as their role to simply make war on the Trump administration, on President Donald Trump, on the Republican Party, on Sarah Sanders, who I think does a terrific job as press secretary. It's a daily war that they make on behalf of their party, the Democratic Party. But if you haven't heard or you didn't see these White House reporters responding to Dr. Jackson's report on President Trump's sterling health, you really have to hear some of these. So we've prepared a few clips of these reporters and their questions of Navy doctor Ronnie Jackson. Let's play the first one.
There have been some questions as part of your exam. I'm wondering if you talked to the president about this, about the president's mental fitness. He has pushed back on that, calling himself a staple genius. Can you assess the president's mental fitness for office?
Absolutely. So many of you may have picked up on the fact that we did do a cognitive assessment as part of the exam. And initially, I had no intention of including a cognitive assessment in this exam because, to be honest with you, per all the guidelines that are out there, it's not indicated at this time.
So right out of the box, the reporter wants to know, can you tell us about President Trump's mental fitness for office? And of course, Dr. Jackson was happy to do that. But one of the ironies is, why are we talking about this guy's mental fitness? I mean, President Trump, in my view, is doing the best job of any president we've had since Ronald Reagan. And in fact, many observers will say that Trump has achieved more in his first year in office than President Reagan did in his. And I think that's right. And so I'm not sure why exactly we're talking about his mental fitness. But let's play the next clip. The reporters were not yet satisfied.
Can you say, given that there is scrutiny of what was overlooked at the time with President Reagan in terms of Alzheimer's and things he was then known to suffer from at a later date, can you say that whether the test that you ran would exclude any of those things and what the possibility of overlooking something like that would be?
I can reliably say, and I think that the folks in the mental health community out there would back me up on the fact that if he had some type of mental cognitive issue, that this test is sensitive enough, it would pick up on it. He would not have got 30 out of 30 on the test. So I'm very confident at this particular stage that he has nothing like that going on. And like I said, my personal experience has been that he has absolutely no cognitive or mental issues whatsoever. That he is very sharp.
Pow! You'd think that might shut up the White House press corps and lead them into a different topic. But no, we're going to get to more clips in a moment. But note how the reporter just takes a sideways swipe at President Ronald Reagan, referring to what we now know about his incipient Alzheimer's during his last years in office, however she phrased it. Well, I don't think we know any such thing. President Reagan was diagnosed with Alzheimer's years after he left the White House. He was the most successful president of the 20th century. And I don't think there's the slightest reason to think that he was suffering from symptoms of Alzheimer's when he was in the White House. But in any event, Dr. Jackson says, no, if there was any impairment from that source or any other, it would show up on the test. But the White House press corps still not satisfied. Let's roll the next clip.
Does this president ask you about how he could follow his predecessor's example to be as fit as Barack Obama was? And the second question, do you keep a tally of how much golf the U.S. president plays? That is something the press office repeatedly does not tell us. Do you keep a tally, and do you consider that exercise?
No, I've not had that conversation. No, I don't keep a tally. And yes, like everything else being on the golf course, there is a certain amount of exercise involved in that.
Now, you get the feeling that Dr. Jackson has had about enough of this. He answered those questions pretty brusquely, I think. But let's just pause on this for a minute. The first question this reporter has got is, have you talked with President Trump about how he might undertake to be as physically fit as his predecessor, Barack Obama? So Obama's been gone now for a year, but the White House press corps is still mourning his absence. They are still worshiping at the shrine of a president whose lack of success can only be explained by the fact that he wasn't trying to do a good job for America. He doesn't much like America, thinks we're too powerful, too rich, didn't really try to advance our interests overseas or to strengthen our economy at home. But in any event, I suppose, by the way, if Trump was going to try to match Barack Obama's level of physical fitness, I suppose one thing he could do is take up smoking. I don't know. That's something they didn't ask about. And then, of course, the White House press corps is bitter about the fact that the White House doesn't issue a tally, a running total of how many times the president has played golf. They think he golfs too much. Now, how many pictures did you see over the 8 years that Barack Obama was president of Obama on the golf course? I mean, thousands. And it didn't seem to be a problem at that time. But now the White House press corps is bitter that they don't know exactly how many rounds of golf President Trump has played. We're going to run to a break, and when we come back, we're going to have more from the White House press corps and its obsessive concern with President Trump's mental well-being.
For hardworking Americans like us, it doesn't seem like there's ever enough time in the day. Freshly is the easiest and most convenient way to eat healthy, no matter what life throws your way. Freshly's team of chefs create all-natural, gluten-free dinners and deliver them fresh to your door. So even if you get stuck at work late, you can still come home to a delicious dinner cooked by a chef. No more worrying about having to figure out what's for dinner, and especially no mess to clean up after. Freshly chefs source the finest all-natural ingredients they can find, and then they work with nutritionists to ensure that their meals are as healthy as possible. All of the meals are made to order and pre-portioned. Their menu is created by chefs for people who want to eat healthy but are living busy lives and don't always have the time to do shopping, cooking, and cleaning. Check out this week's menu created by Freshly's chefs and get $25 off your first order of 6 chef-cooked dinners, plus free shipping by going to freshly.com/Laura. You'll feel so relieved to come home to a chef-cooked meal every night with Freshly. That's freshly.com/Laura for $25 off your first order. Order today to see what life's like when you no longer have to think about dinner.
I'm in love with her and I feel fine.
Welcome back to the Laura Ingraham Show, your healthy radio addiction. Let's go to a phone call right now. Let's go to Joanna in Arizona on line 1. Joanna, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Fire away, you're on the air.
Oh, I didn't realize that. You know, I have become very concerned about this Senator Cory Booker. He seems to become unhinged very often, and is he mentally capable of being a senator, let alone the President of the United States?
Joanna, you make a great point. What Joanna's talking about, for those who haven't heard about it, is during this Senate hearing yesterday when the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kirstjen Nielsen, was testifying, Cory Booker went on and on about how he cried. He burst into tears when he heard about President Trump's alleged S-hole comment. And I think Joanna makes a great point. If we're going to start talking about mental stability and fitness, there's a few Democrats who might be on that list, including Cory Booker. James, let's play the next question from Dr. Ronnie Jackson's press briefing yesterday on his physical examination of our president.
In layman's terms if possible, and you've been doing a great job at that. What you ruled out in these cognitive tests, there have been reports that the president has forgotten names, that he's repeating himself. Are you ruling out things like early onset Alzheimer's? Are you looking at dementia-like symptoms?
Yeah, so I think that cognitive test, it's well respected. It's a test that's used, throughout the United States. Lots and lots of institutions use that test. It's the one that they use at Walter Reed for patients that they feel like they need to do cognitive screens on. So it's a universally accepted test. And like I said, it's a little bit more extensive than some of the shorter ones that are in some of the guidelines. But it screens for all those things.
So the White House press corps is not satisfied. Dr. Jackson keeps telling him he's in great shape. He aced the mental cognition test, got a perfect score, 30 out of 30, but they keep coming back for more. And so this reporter says, well, there have been reports that he's forgotten names. Let me just tell you something. For the benefit of our younger listeners, there's a certain little part of your brain that remembers people's names, doesn't do anything else. That's what it's responsible for. And it starts to wither when you get to be about 50 years old. And if everybody who forgot people's names was deemed to be unfit, I can tell you there would not be a single Democrat left in Washington, D.C. Let's play the next one.
Explain to me how a guy who eats McDonald's and fried chicken and all those Diet Cokes and who never exercises is in as good a shape as you say he's in.
It's called genetics. I don't know. It's some people have just great genes. I told the president that if he had a healthier diet over the last 20 years, he might live to be 200 years old. I don't know. I mean, he has incredible genes. I just assume. I mean, if I didn't watch what I ate, I wouldn't have in the cardiac and overall health that he has. So he's very healthy despite those things, and I don't think that he does that anymore. I mean, he's getting to the White House now. He's eating what the chefs are cooking for him now, and they're cooking a much healthier diet for him now, and we're going to continue to work on that and make that even healthier.
I love this one. The White House press corps is so frustrated. How can this guy be so healthy, right? He eats Big Macs. I'll share a guilty secret here with the audience. I actually really like Big Macs. When I don't have plans for lunch, I don't have a lunch meeting, don't have a meeting with somebody in a restaurant, something I got to do like that, I will very frequently drive through a McDonald's and get a Big Mac and a Diet Coke. That really is one of my favorite meals. So I can totally relate to Donald Trump's preference here, and I find it kind of endearing. I mean, here's a guy who apparently is worth $1 billion or a couple billion, whatever it is, dollars. But he doesn't care if he likes Big Macs. He's going to eat a Big Mac. And personally, I kind of like that, and I think most voters do as well. If you want to comment on this, just give us a call. 855-40-LAURA is the number to call. James, I think we got one clip left. Is that right? Let's roll the last one.
Just to make sure we're clear on this, when you analyze his cognitive ability or neurological functions, that is not the same thing as a psychiatric exam or a psychological exam.
It is not. No, it's a screening assessment for cognitive impairment.
So, in other words, what this last guy is asking, this last reporter is asking Dr. Ronnie Jackson, a rear admiral in the U.S. Navy who administers these examinations to presidents. He did previously with President Obama. And the gist of the question is the reporters have struck out. They've gone back to the well over and over again, asking, isn't there some chance that the president could be mentally impaired? And the doctor keeps saying, no, he got a perfect score on the cognition test. He's in great physical shape. He's in great mental shape. And so this reporter, in a last desperate sort of Hail Mary attempt to see if he can get the doctor to say something that they can use, because obviously they have no desire to report that President Trump is in tremendous condition, says okay, he's not stupid, he's not suffering from dementia, but he still might be crazy. Isn't that right? You didn't test him for mental health. He still could be crazy. He could be, he could be whatever, mentally ill, psychotic. And the doctor says, well, yeah, no, that's not what I tested for. I didn't give him a psychiatric exam. This is a physical. And so I suppose some of the reporters, at least, walked out of the room satisfied that the possibility that President Trump could be mentally ill and therefore unfit for office was not entirely ruled out by the Navy physician. So what we saw yesterday was a microcosm, and kind of an entertaining microcosm, because the reporters kept charging up the hill, and the doctor, who did a terrific job, obviously a very, very bright, able guy, kept shoving them back down, responding unequivocally to all of their kind of pathetic questions. But what we saw there was just a glimpse into something that goes on almost every day, certainly every day when Sarah Sanders does a White House press briefing. And we've never seen anything like it. Certainly there was an adversarial relationship between President George W. Bush and the press. There was an adversarial relationship between his father and the press, although I think probably less pronounced at that time. There was a highly adversarial relationship between President Reagan and the press. But we've never seen anything like the open, naked hostility, hatred that the White House press corps exhibits toward President Trump and his administration. And the one who most often bears the brunt of it is Sarah Sanders, who I think does an excellent job day after day after day of responding to these lunatics, really, who are going after her. We're going to go to a break, and when we come back, we're going to be joined by Jenna Ellis, former prosecutor and law professor, and we'll be talking about the state of the DACA negotiations. Be right back after this. Welcome back to the Laura Ingraham Show, your healthy radio addiction. I'm John Hinderaker from Powerline, filling in for Laura today. And we are joined now by Jenna Ellis, former prosecutor, a law professor at Colorado Christian University, and a contributor to the Washington Examiner and the Federalist. Jenna, thanks for being on the program.
Hi, John. Thanks so much for having me on.
You know, the news cycle, last several news cycles have been obsessed with the meeting that President Trump had with a group of 6 or 8 people, including notoriously Senator Dick Durbin, and the negotiations that were going on over immigration in connection with the next government appropriations funding bill. And President Trump's alleged use of a derogatory term in referring to certain countries from which we get immigrants or refugees. And it's really almost totally obscured the substantive issue that underlies all of this, which is DACA, the so-called Dreamers, and the next government funding bill, which the Democrats are threatening to block and thereby shut down the government. Could you just give us a quick recap to begin with, Jen, about what is this all about? What's going on here?
Yeah, and I'm so glad that we're actually talking today, John, about the substantive issue of immigration, because that's what people really do need to focus on. The DREAM Act and DACA, from a constitutional perspective, the policy itself is actually not a bad idea. We do have to do something with the people who were brought here when they were children and didn't themselves break the law, but are here. This is the only home they've ever known. But we need to do that constitutionally and with a lucid policy. President Obama did that through executive order, which is fundamentally unconstitutional. He just
and Jenna, hey, let me just stop you there real quick, because I want to emphasize what you just said. We have immigration laws. Like all of our laws, they are written by Congress and signed into law by prior presidents. And under the law, these relatively young people, although I think some of them are 30 or 40, but these relatively young people who were brought here as children illegally by their parents are not legal residents. I mean, they just aren't. That's a fact. And under our law, it is illegal to employ them. Again, that's not an opinion. That's a fact. And so what President Obama tried to do was to change the law, to legalize the status of these people and to actually issue them work permits so that they could work legally, contrary to federal statute. And as you say, that's just flat out illegal. He didn't have the power to do that.
Right, he didn't. It was absolutely unconstitutional, and that is why President Trump repealed that and said, and rescinded DACA and said, let's not defer the deportation and proceedings. Let's get going. And he has to kick this to Congress and say, Congress, under Article 1, Section 8, you have the only legislative authority to actually change the law. And so Congress, you need to do something about it. But he was very, very wise in saying, if you Democrats want to have a policy that provides some sort of pathway for legal status, it doesn't have to be citizenship. And I think that also, John, is a really big key point here. The people under DACA don't have to be citizens. They could have a green card. They could have some other legal status, a work authorization. Congress could do a lot of things. But President Trump is saying, if you want to provide a pathway to legal status, then you also have to provide the fundamental security that the government constitutionally is mandated to do. And so that's the compromise that President Trump is seeking. And he's saying, if you want to have legal status for these dreamers, then you also need to provide funding for the wall. You have to compromise here and allow the Republican base to also understand that we as a nation want to secure our borders. We want to have protection. We're not just going to open this up to anyone who wants to come here, because no one constitutionally who's not a citizen actually has a right to be in the United States.
So let's elaborate on that a little bit, Jenna, because you make a great point. Now, President Trump has been a negotiator his entire life, right, as a businessman. And what he's basically saying here to the Democrats is, look, you want to change our immigration laws to legalize the status of these people who are now here under our current law illegally. I'm willing to do that. I'll sign legislation that does legalize the status of these people, but I'm not going to give it away, okay? We're going to bargain here. And if you want that, we got to have more, because the law also says that certain people, that illegals shouldn't enter, that people shouldn't enter this country illegally and shouldn't stay here if they do. And the fundamental duty of the federal government is to enforce those laws. And so if you want me to sign legislation that legalizes the status of these DACA people, there's got to be a quid pro quo. We got to get something for that. And the something includes the wall. And I believe, Jenna, you correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe that the other thing that President Trump wants is E-Verify or some form of more effective internal enforcement of our immigration laws. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's my understanding, and I think that's also entirely valid and reasonable of the president, because the Dreamers, these people who were brought when they were children, they are here illegally. But the important thing to remember is that they didn't intentionally themselves break the law. Yes, they are here illegally. For them to remain here currently is illegal. But they're in a little bit different category of persons than people who are seeking to enter themselves intentionally as adults and circumvent the system. And so we do have to deal with this category of persons. But what President Trump doesn't want to do is just simply open the border to say, sure, anyone can come here illegally. We don't care about our rule of law. It's surprising to me, John, that the Democratic base is quoting this poem from 1883, "Give me you're tired, you're poor, you're hungry," as if that's the constitutional mandate, and they're actually ignoring our rule of law completely. We're not bound by a poem that was written 100 years after the Constitution. We're still bound by Congress providing that uniform rule of immigration and naturalization, and we are also, as a government, responsible for border security.
We're talking with Jen Ellis, former prosecutor and law professor at Colorado Christian University. So, Jenna, where do you see this going? I mean, as is always the case, seemingly, when you're dealing with these kind of last-minute funding disputes, and the parties are trying to get something in exchange for agreeing to an appropriations bill. It's kind of a game of chicken. And I think Friday is a deadline, and if they don't have an agreement by Friday, then we're going to see one of these, very partial government shutdowns that we've experienced several times in the past. Where do you see this going? Are the Democrats going to refuse to compromise and shut down the government?
It is a matter of who blinks first, and hopefully both sides will be reasonable. We haven't really seen the Democrats being that reasonable lately. I think the fervor pitch has been just complete anti-Trump, but if they actually consider that Trump is allowing them to get something that they want, they should approach this reasonably and be willing to negotiate. And so I see, hopefully, that something will happen by Friday. We've seen the government shut down for a little bit in the past, and that really isn't that effective, I don't think. And I don't think that will move President Trump whatsoever. He has been a firm negotiator. He's going to continue for that. And from a criminal defense perspective, as that's what I currently practice as well, I hope that this will be a compromise, because I've represented people in court that have collateral immigration consequences who fall under the DREAM Act. And a lot of these people don't actually even know that they're here with illegal status until they have to go through some kind of court process. And it's very difficult and very traumatizing. And so to recognize that these are people who have contributed to American society, they really do need to be dealt with in a compassionate and legal manner with legislation. That's something that I think both sides should be willing to do, but also look at it from the perspective that, again, we're not just going to open our borders, and I hope we'll see a compromise by Friday.
Let me close with this last point, though, Jenna. Are the Democrats even negotiating in good faith? This whole, S-hole controversy that has dominated the news for the last week arose out of a meeting that President Trump had with Dick Durbin and Lindsey Graham, who were proposing what they called a compromise, but which really was just a one-way street where the liberals got everything they wanted on immigration. And President Trump kind of blew up at them and told them their proposal was unacceptable. I mean, that's what was going on there. So instead of coming back to the negotiating table or continuing, and negotiating in good faith, what Dick Durbin did was to run off and talk to every reporter in Washington, D.C. and relate at least what he claims President Trump said in this private conversation. This isn't a speech Trump's giving. No, this is a private conversation, a negotiating session with 6 or 8 people that were in the room, and he did it to try to make Trump look bad, obviously, and with some success, he made the United States of America look bad around the world, which I think was just flat out unpatriotic. But I mean, is this the action of somebody who really wants to negotiate, who wants to compromise?
That's a great question, John, and I think that the problem with both sides is that we tend to fail to attribute good faith to the parties categorically. And I would certainly say that some of the Democrats, like Dick Durbin, have proven that they aren't negotiating in good faith, and it would be reasonable for President Trump to say, we're going to exclude you then from the table. I mean, we have the majority in the House and the Senate right now. We don't necessarily need you at the table if that's the kind of actions that you're going to engage in, but also not let just one person, 1 or 2 people speak for the entire party, but basically use him as an example, but invite the rest of the Democrats and say, we're going to still attribute good faith to you as long as you can continue to show that you are negotiating in good faith. And I think that would send a really strong signal to both President Trump's base and also the liberals that you need to continue to negotiate in good faith.
Well, I'll tell you one thing I would do if I was President Trump. I would tell Dick Durbin that I'm never again going to have a private conversation with him unless a court reporter is present. If Dick Durbin wants to go off and talk to reporters about what he claims the president said, if I were the president, I just wouldn't talk to him unless a reporter is making a court reporter is making a verbatim transcript. Jenna Ellis, thank you so much for being with us. We're going to go to a break, and we'll come back with your calls at 855-40-LAURA.
In everlasting words and dedicate them all to me.
Welcome back to the Laura Ingraham Show, your healthy radio addiction. Before the break, we were talking about the negotiations going on between President Trump and his administration on one hand, and the Democrats and some Republicans like Lindsey Graham on the other hand, over the DACA beneficiaries and immigration in general, and funding the federal government to keep the doors open, with the clock ticking toward I believe Friday deadline to get some kind of compromise, some kind of funding bill agreed on. And the question I raise is, are the Democrats at all acting in good faith here? Do they want to negotiate? Do they want to compromise? Do they want something that will actually provide legal status to the so-called dreamers, the people in the DACA category? Or do they in fact just want to keep this controversy going because they think it fires up their base and is to their advantage politically? I'm not sure they want to compromise. I'm not sure they want to solve the problem that they keep talking about of what to do with these illegal residents who were brought here as children by their parents. And I think one sign that they're not negotiating in good faith, that they don't want to make a deal, they don't want to actually solve any problems, is that what they really want to do is to call President Trump a racist. And they've been very open about this. It's a constant refrain. One of the reporters called out a question to him as he's doing some kind of a briefing with the head of a foreign country. I forget exactly which appearance this was, but the reporter calls out a question, Mr. President, are you a racist? And normally they don't ask a question, they just assert it baldly. President Trump is a racist because the countries that he referred to as S-hole countries, allegedly referred to that way, and allegedly the countries were Haiti and some countries in Africa. And so his opponents say, oh, well, that must mean he's a racist. And then allegedly, he mentioned Norway in some context, and there have been differing accounts of what exactly he said about Norway. He commented on their immigration system, or he talked about Norwegians as being desirable immigrants or something. Nobody knows exactly what. And the fact that he apparently made some favorable comment about Norway is just more proof that the president must be a racist. Now, I have a personal interest in this because I'm a Norwegian American. I'm about as close in terms of ancestry to being 100% Norwegian as a person can be, because nobody is 100% anything, genetically. But I come as close as anybody does. And so if somebody says, hey, we should get more immigrants from Norway, I say, yeah, that's a great idea. I'd love to see more Norwegian Americans. But of course, what this is really all about, if you strip away all the nonsense that the Democrats keep hurling at us, what this is really all about is what should our immigration policy be? And what President Trump is saying is we should have a merit-based system. We should admit people to our country the way Canada does. I'd love to have Canada's immigration system, and so would Donald Trump. We should admit people who want to emigrate to our country on the basis of merit, on the basis of how much they can contribute to our society and to our economy. And that's not what we do. We admit people on completely irrational grounds. We have this silly diversity lottery where we admit 50,000 people from places like Bangladesh and so on. We have this silly chain migration system where once a person gets in, he can bring over his relatives and they can bring over their relatives and so on until the entire city of Mogadishu has moved to the United States. This is crazy. And Trump is right. What we need is a merit-based immigration system, and that's not about race. It's about bringing people to this country who can contribute instead of going on welfare and staying there indefinitely, which I think is what the Democrats really want, because when they look at those people, what they see is future Democratic Party voters. We are going to go to a break, and we will have more after we return from these messages.
Your Healthy Radio Addiction starts now.
Power to the people!
The Laura Ingraham Show.
Welcome to the Laura Ingraham Show, Your Healthy Radio Addiction. I'm John Hinderaker from Powerline, filling in for Laura today. Before the break, we were talking about immigration, about DACA, about the negotiations that have been going on between President Trump and Democrats and also some Republicans, and about the famous S-hole controversy that the Democrats fomented, perhaps because they don't really want to compromise, they don't really want to solve the problem of the so-called dreamers, the DACA people. And if you want to weigh in on this whole controversy, please give us a call. 855-40-LAURA is the number to call. Let's go right now to Howard in Pennsylvania on line 2. Howard, welcome to the Laura Ingraham Show.
Thank you very much. My big question in all this DACA business is, where are the parents of these DACA people, the mothers, the fathers that brought them in? If they register to be in this program, will there be an opportunity to round them up and expel them, which they should be?
Well, that's a great question, Howard, and it's one of the issues, as I understand it, in play in these negotiations. One of the things the Democrats want is not only for the so-called dreamers, the DACA people who were brought here as children by their parents, not only do the Democrats want them legalized, and they want a path to citizenship for them, but they want their parents legalized so they too can remain in the country. So it's kind of a get-out-of-jail-free card. The whole reason why the so-called dreamers are relatively sympathetic is that they're not the ones who broke the law. You know, the theory is they were brought here by their parents. It wasn't a voluntary decision by them, and they shouldn't be punished. But of course, the Democrats, that makes them the most sympathetic group for the pro-illegal immigration people to talk about. But you can see what the Democrats really want, because one of the things they bargain for is that the parents be allowed legally to stay in this country as well. Let's go to Donald in New York on line 1. Donald, welcome to the program.
Yeah, hi. I was listening this morning to your to the report, the program where the news media was questioning the professional doctor about the president's health, and
right.
It dawned on me that most of those people they probably should go through the same cognitive and a physical exam that the president's gone through to be sure they're even qualified to sit there and ask those questions. Most of them sound like, I won't use that word, but you've used it many times, and so have they. They sound just like that. That they come across like they know it all, and they're the experts, and they're the horses pulling the wagon, and they're not. They're in the wagon taking a free ride, and hopefully the president will get rid of them as fast as he can. And as far as DACA is concerned, Obama brought all those kids in by the ton without their parents. That's why a ton of our kids in this country caught the measles and diseases from those kids a few years ago when they were brought here en masse by the Obama administration.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in the mix there, as you say, Donald. Earlier in the show, we were talking about this press briefing that was given by Dr. Ronnie Jackson, the Navy Rear Admiral, a physician that looks after the president. He did this with President Obama, now with President Donald Trump, and he was reporting on the physical examination that he gave to President Trump, and in which President Trump did remarkably well. He's in tremendous health, according to Dr. Jackson, and Trump insisted that Jackson also give him a mental test, a mental cognition test. And Jackson did that, although he said he didn't see any need for it, but he gave it to him. And Trump got a perfect score, 30 out of 30. perfect mental functioning. And Jackson talked about that, and we played some of the clips from these White House press corps reporters who just couldn't stand it. They couldn't deal with it, and they kept asking question after question after question about Trump's mental state, and might he be crazy? Might he be mentally ill, even though he gets a perfect score on the mental cognition test, and all this kind of thing. Might he be suffering from early onset Alzheimer's or something? And as you listen to this, my reaction is the same as Donald's, which is that these people are nuts. There is a nut or a group of nuts in this picture, but it's not Donald Trump. The people who maybe are completely lacking in self-knowledge and ought to look in the mirror if they want to talk about bizarre behavior are the reporters, the White House press corps. These people conduct themselves in the most inappropriate and frequently just all-out crazy manner of anybody you're ever going to see. So once again, I think what we're seeing there in part is the lack of self-knowledge and self-understanding on the part of these people who presume to attack and to criticize every single day the President of the United States, and who believe deep down that they are so much better informed, so much smarter, so much more moral than the rest of us, and so they should be the ones to give us guidance in all things, and to give the president guidance in all things. I think these reporters need to take a long, hard look in the mirror. I want to stay with the topic of immigration, and we were talking with a guest earlier, Jenna Ellis, and we talked about the fact that the underlying merits of the disagreement here about what our immigration policy should be, what our immigration laws should look like, has mostly gotten overlooked in this S-hole controversy which the Democrats started, the flames of which they've fanned, which they've perpetuated now for a week, I think. It's all they want to talk about. And what apparently they don't want to talk about is the merits of what's this debate all about? What's being negotiated? And what's being negotiated is certain aspects of our immigration laws, our immigration policies, with the broader aspects of immigration intended to follow in subsequent legislation to the extent that changes are going to be made. And I want to go back to that topic and talk a little bit more about the substance of the immigration issues that are being debated here, but specifically in the context of that famous meeting in the White House, which President Trump had with the appalling Dick Durbin, just one of the most awful people in Washington, D.C., the Democratic senator from Illinois, but others were there too, including Lindsey Graham, and Graham is collaborating with Dick Durbin and other Democrats in trying to change our immigration laws, in my view, for the worse. And I want to read from and talk a little bit about a post that one of my partners on Powerline, Paul Mirengoff, did last night, because I think it's very insightful in terms of what's really going on here in Washington. And Paul's post is titled, Trump and Graham, the End of an Ugly Friendship. And he writes, Lindsey Graham, the Arlen Specter of the South, which I think is a great line. Lindsey Graham is indeed the Arlen Specter of the South, has been trying to ingratiate himself with President Trump, his former adversary. By doing so, Graham hopes to achieve his longtime dream of granting amnesty to illegal aliens, which of course is what this is all about. And Paul writes, one happy byproduct of the unfortunate S-hole controversy is that in all likelihood, Graham's friendship with the president is at an end. It's over not because of that controversy, but because of what led to it. Simply stated, Graham tried to bamboozle Trump. The deal that Graham helped write and then took to Trump lurched to the left in every significant particular. For example, it included litigation landmines for the border wall. It retained the diversity lottery under a different name. It provided work permits for the parents of the DACA population, which is what we were just talking about with the caller a couple of minutes ago. Paul continues, Trump was bound to explode when he learned the particulars of the Graham-Durbin proposal. It is Graham's fault that the president exploded, though of course the president, not Graham, is responsible for any inappropriate language, whatever its exact nature, that he may have used. Today during a hearing, and this is the hearing with Kirsten Nielsen, Secretary of Homeland Security, Graham peddled Dick Durbin's claim that during a phone call with the Illinois senator just 2 hours before the ill-fated White House meeting, Trump was pleased with the proposal that Durbin outlined to him. In his typical preening manner, Graham kept asking what happened during the intervening 2 hours and vowing to, quote, get to the bottom of this. And Paul Mirengoff, writing on Powerline, continues, here's what happened. Trump concluded correctly that Durbin and Graham were playing him. And that's what led to the heated exchanges which these men had in the Oval Office a couple of hours after Trump's conversation with Senator Dick Durbin. We're going to run to a break, and we're going to pick it up with more of this commentary on what's really happening behind the scenes in Washington, D.C. right after these messages.
So you got to let me know. Should I stay or should I go?
Welcome back to the Laura Ingraham Show. Before the break, I was reading from and commenting on a post that my friend Paul Mirengoff, my colleague at Powerline, wrote last night. And I want to finish that up. If you're calling, 855-40-LAURA is the number. If you're holding, please continue holding, and we're going to get to the calls in about 2 minutes. But I want to wrap this up first because this is the inside story of what happened at that meeting and what led to that famous meeting last week between President Trump and a group of people that included Dick Durbin and Lindsey Graham. Paul Mirengoff writes, it's no mystery why Trump balked at what Graham and Durbin presented to him at the White House. From his perspective, it was a bad deal. Like everything else Graham has ever proposed on the subject, it was long on amnesty and short on preventing future illegal immigration. Graham and Durbin are said to have been dismayed that when they met with Trump at the White House, conservatives were there. Durbin and Graham thought, or pretend to have thought, that Trump would give away the store without hearing from Bob Goodlatte, a key player in the House, or Tom Cotton, a key ally in the Senate. This is what Lindsey Graham means when he says ominously that he wants to, quote, get to the bottom of what happened between Trump's phone call with Dick Durbin and the meeting. Something quite nefarious. Trump talked to people with views that differ from Graham's. Graham thus gives the game away. He wanted to sneak one past the president. He was not acting in good faith. No wonder Trump exploded. Paul Mirengoff writes, to be sure, Trump said last Tuesday that he would sign whatever bill the smart people in the room during the televised meeting with a much larger group of senators and congressmen, whatever bill the people in that room send him. But he didn't say he would sign whatever bill Dick Durbin and Lindsey Graham concoct. Bob Goodlatte, Tom Cotton, and other steadfast conservatives were also in the room. For that, we should be grateful. And I am grateful for that. And I'm grateful that President Trump doesn't appear to have any intention of selling out the many, many, many voters who voted for him in large part because of his stance on illegal immigration. And it's good to see that when he talks to the Democrats and to Lindsey Graham on this topic, and they present him with a proposal that they're trying to sneak past him, which gives away the store. It's good to see that he's got good conservatives like Good Latte and Tom Cotton in the room to help him to respond to that kind of proposal. Let's go to the phone lines now. If you want to be heard, 855-40. Laura is the number to call. Let's go to David in Florida on line 2. David, you're on the air.
Yes, it is good we have people like Cotton, and also I'm very proud of the people in Florida where I'm from, Mr. Ron DeSantis, Matt Gaetz, for leading the charge against this treason. But there is one person who is doing nothing. Congresswoman Susan Brooks, chair of the House Ethics Committee from Indiana, refuses to bring Debbie Wasserman Schultz before the House Ethics Committee. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the greatest congressional traitor in U.S. history, walks free committing treasonous felonies, and Susan Brooks, chair of the House Ethics Committee, does
David,
nothing.
let me just pause you for a
called
second,
her
because I'm
office.
sure. Hang on a second. I'm sure our listeners are saying, "Well, what are you talking about?" I mean, there's a lot of things I don't like about Debbie Wasserman Schultz, but when you say treasonous activities, are you talking about the Pakistani IT folks and the House intelligence issues, or what do you have in mind there?
The three felonies, which are salient and prominent. One, she funneled the monies through Hillary Clinton. She was head of the DNC. She funneled the money, $12.4 million, to Christopher Steele, a foreign national. That is a felony. Two, she was accused and found guilty in civil court 6 months ago of stealing the presidential primary election from Bernie Sanders and $200 million. Found guilty. Number three, yes, she is covering for Imran Awan, the Pakistani national who's been stealing terabytes of secrets off of government servers. Why is Debbie Wasserman Schultz never mentioned, never brought before any committee, never touched? What is the bubble of protection around her? I must know.
All right. David, you make some good points there. And, of course, one of the things frustrating to so many of us conservatives is there's all these investigations that go on in Washington, but they never end, and there's never any outcome. There's never any punishment, you know. And there are multiple scandals here. Certainly the scandal of the Russian dossier, which we now know that the DNC and Hillary Clinton's campaign paid for, a pack of lies, smears directed against President Trump. Which, worse yet, apparently the FBI got into the act with the dossier. I mean, it's a terrible, terrible, terrible scandal. I think there was news this morning, which I haven't had a chance to follow up yet on, about these Pakistani IT folks who are working for some Democrats in the House, including Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and apparently making off with all kinds of intelligence secrets. And the Democrats are trying to sweep that under the rug. And will we ever get to the bottom of that story? I don't know. I think it's highly doubtful. Let's go to Rick in Florida on line 1. Rick, welcome to the program.
Hi, John. How you doing today?
Great.
John, can you, speaking of Hillary Clinton, can you imagine her doing a press conference with her doctor spilling everything there was to know about Mrs. Clinton?
Yeah, and of course, one of the funny things is the Democrats are going on and on and on about Trump's weight, right? You know, and like many of us, he probably weighs a few extra pounds. But do you think if it was a doctor who'd examined Hillary Clinton, that they would go on and on and on about her weight? Do you think that they would go on and on and on about whether it's possible she could be mentally ill or she could have incipient Alzheimer's? Do you think there's any chance that the word Chardonnay would have been mentioned by any member of the White House press corps if this doctor had been reporting on his examination of President Hillary Clinton? What do you think, Rick? Do you think the answers to those questions are no?
Speaking of the White House press corps, a while ago you said they are making war on the president. They are also, in addition, they're also making things up. So, not to be trusted.
It would be hard to identify a group of people in our society who collectively do a worse job than the members of the White House press corps. That's another scandal. And these people need to look in the mirror and examine themselves instead of getting hysterical over whether our president is mentally fit for office. We're going to go to a break right now. When we come back, we are going to be joined by Congressman Paul Gosar of Arizona. Be right back.
Podcast One has new shows on our new app. Check out all the cool features to help you explore our exciting new programming, like America's Lakers podcast with Jay Moore, So Random with Corinne Olympios, Attack Each Day, The Harbaugh's podcast, Not Just Sports with Susie Schuster and Rich Eisen, and Sessions with Randy Jackson, as well as your old favorites like The Lady Gang, Steve Austin, Shaquille O'Neal, and Adam Carolla. Get the new Podcast One app in the App Store, Google Play, or podcastone.com.
By the time I get to Phoenix, she'll be rising.
Welcome back to the Laura Ingraham Show, your healthy radio addiction. I'm John Hinderacher from Powerline, filling in for Laura today. And we are joined now by Congressman Paul Gosar, representative of Arizona's 4th Congressional District. Congressman, thanks for being on the program.
Thanks, John.
Congressman, we're going to talk today about DACA, about the immigration issue, about the looming partial government shutdown. We've already talked about that a fair amount today. But before we get to that, I just want to ask you a quick question. I'm in the studio here, and there's a TV set up in the corner, and it's tuned to Fox News. And what I'm seeing there is Senator Jeff Flake of your state, Arizona, who's giving a speech in the Senate, in which it appears that he is denouncing President Trump. What do you know about this?
Well, I mean, the senator made some comments last week to compare the president with Stalin, which I think is disrespectful in any case, shape, or fashion of the...
Congressman, can I just stop you for a second? It's not just disrespectful, it's idiotic. Okay, it's idiotic. President Trump would have to murder about 20 million people before he gets into the same sentence with Joseph Stalin. I mean, this is just, well, ridiculous.
And that's why the perfect analogy for this is when you're digging a hole, stop digging.
So is Flake resigning from the Senate or retiring from the Senate? I mean, is this his swan song? What's going on here?
Well, this is what we've seen in Arizona. He was unelectable, and that's why he decided not to run again. And so I can't speak for the senator. We've had our tiffs back and forth in regards to constitutionality, following the rule of law, and whatnot. So, this is the way the senator wants to go out, and it wouldn't be my call. It sounds to me like I would want to be something of a mitigating force for a solution instead of angering the people I represent back home by disrespecting a president. I didn't see Jeff calling out Barack Obama and his lawlessness, which to me is pretty pathetic.
Well, it's unbelievable, and certainly no Democratic senators made their swan song a denunciation of Barack Obama. Well, let's move on because part of at least what Jeff Flake is talking about has to do with the main topic in the news today, which is DACA, immigration, the negotiations going on between President Trump and the Democrats, along with some Republicans, Lindsey Graham for one. And all in the context of a funding bill that's intended to avert a government shutdown. What's the current status there in Washington of those issues?
Well, first of all, DACA should not be associated with a spending bill. It has to be a completely separate application, John. We've said it once, we've said it twice, and we mean it. From that standpoint, we have a broken immigration system. We want to make sure that we're doing this right and not setting precedents. But you don't associate that with the artificial timelines that are being imposed. Think about this, John. I mean, we actually had a Ninth Circuit judge rule on a stay on an illegal, unconstitutional program that was presented or built by President Obama. I mean, Tell me it isn't so, Joe, that this is how this works.
I haven't bothered to read this crazy judge's opinion, and we've had some kind of lunatic decisions that have been reversed by activist judges trying to attack the Trump administration. But this one I can't wrap my head around. As you say, it's DACA that's obviously illegal. There's no question about it. Obama even admitted it. He didn't have the power to rewrite our immigration laws. And this crazy judge out in California, not only does he say, whoa, wait a minute, that was illegal, now he apparently is trying to say that what President Obama illegally did, President Trump can't undo. I mean, this is the craziest thing I ever heard of.
Absolutely, and you compound it by not only creating a program in name only, but the president was also illegal by redirecting funds that were not, purviewed for DACA. They were supposed to go to some other program, and he chose to redirect them through the Homeland Security, State Department, and DOJ. Another complete derangement of the rule of law.
We're talking with Congressman Paul Gosar. So where do we sit? I mean, as I understand it, the government starts to run out of money on Friday. Are House Republicans like you? Are you trying to just get a completely clean spending bill passed, or what? Where do we sit?
I said this, John, over and over again. We ought to fund our military for the full year. We ought to take and break this tie-in holding our military hostage. Do a CR for the discretionary spending for 1 month. That means that the BCA backs you up, so that it forces good behavior. Now, the House has done its appropriation bills and its budget. They've done the 12 appropriation bills and the budget. The Senate hasn't. We got to make sure that we have this thing not just with the Democrats, but with the Senate to do their job on budgetary items. We got to do that. So my suggestion has been full funding for the military so we can get our affairs in order and help our men and women that are dying in harm's way and putting their lives in harm's way. Discretionary spending for 1 month CR. Put the S-chip on there. Go ahead and put some of the Obama taxes on there and the VA and send it over. That's going to pass the House. And we got the bully pulpit with the president. It's time for the bully pulpit to sound off and start showing the American people where the problem lies in the Senate. Is that these Mickey Mouse rules that they try to hide behind so they don't have to take votes. That's what we ought to do. And if they choose to shut it down, the bully pulpit shows who actually shuts it down, and the president becomes the hero. Because unlike Barack Obama, he's got the ability to be friends with the American people, not hold them hostage. So he can make all services essential services and make sure that nobody feels any problem except that we show bad behavior on behalf of the Senate.
Is the problem in the Senate exclusively the Democrats, Congressman? In other words, is this an issue that the Democrats can filibuster and are threatening to do so? Or is it also a problem that we don't have the votes because there are some Republican squishes in the Senate?
Well, here's the deal, John. It's these rules. How about let's go back to the old filibuster rule, so you can't phone home ET, that you have to have a quorum on the floor and that you have to have your voice there until it fades. And then as a gurney carries you away, push the button, yes or no. So there's a lot of things that you can actually do if you're conscientious in your leadership and you're looking at the institution of making sure that votes are taken and your job is being done. It's not just Democrats. We are allowing Democrats to play the game. That goes.
And by the way, Congressman, I want to make sure our listeners understood that because I think it's an important point. When I was young, if you wanted to filibuster in the Senate, you had to actually filibuster. You had to stand up in the wall of the Senate and give a speech. And if you wanted to give a speech, you had to have
a quorum first to start the filibuster, and then you had to be there on the floor. Absolutely.
Right. And so you had the spectacle of these Democratic senators in those days filibustering things like civil rights legislation. And they would have to stand there hour after hour after hour. And sometimes they would do things like read a phone book out loud, right? And it was terrible. I mean, the optics, you couldn't get away with that today, I don't think. It was terrible.
Well,
but now...
Eggs and ham.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But now you don't have to do that. Now, as you said, you can just phone it in. And if you don't have 60 votes, well, you can't bring the thing to the floor. So I agree with you. There are reforms in the Senate rules that desperately need to be made. But let's move on from that, Congressman, and talk a little bit more about the merits of the immigration issues that are in front of us right now. And to me, it seems that President Trump is exactly right if you want to enact some kind of a reform that will change the legal status of these DACA people, and generally speaking, we're talking about younger people who were brought here by their parents illegally, and everybody's sympathetic to them because it wasn't their decision, it was their parents' decision. At least most people are sympathetic to that. And President Trump is saying, well, I'm not going to give that for nothing, right? If you want some changes in the law relating to those people, how about building the wall? And how about some other immigration reform? So where do those negotiations stand?
Well, I mean, you've seen the half-assed attempt that you saw from Durbin and Lindsey Graham running to the president saying they had a deal. The Gang of Six is no such type of deal. In the House, you have a bill that Goodlatte and Labrador and others have put forward that starts looking at building the wall, looking at ending chain migration, ending the visa lottery. These are steps in the right direction. But the case in point here is that it goes back to what Ronald Reagan said, is that when the law is broken, we got to stop holding government accountable and making people accountable for their actions. When you look at these DACA folks, most people feel, that they did not do this on their own volition. This was their law-breaking parents. Well, if you don't break up chain migration, let's walk through the scenario. So you give these DACA recipients a pathway to citizenship. Who do they bring in? But the lawbreakers. And so you start to set a precedent. And we've got to stop the precedents. Our country is sovereign law, and we have the right to uphold who comes in and who comes and leaves. We need to know exactly who those people are coming in. And
if I could just stop you there for a second, Congressman, it seems to me that Trump is clearly right and clearly with the majority of Americans on these substantive immigration issues. Chain migration is idiotic. Pretty soon we're going to have the entire city of Mogadishu moving to the United States. Well, I would if I was in Mogadishu, but this is a crazy
policy. Especially when you look at those that have been convicted of terrorism crimes. 3 out of every 4 came through chain and other mechanisms through family orientation coming to this country. So there's a problem. It also shows you had a problem in the vetting process under Barack Obama. And, let's go back to DACA, John. If this is the only country that they know, why is it that over 40% of the DACA so-called dreamers can't speak good English? English is the language of opportunity, and so it shows us that there's no attempt for assimilation and being part of this culture.
Well, of course, that's one of the big problems with immigration. The left likes to point to the heyday of immigration in the late 19th century, early 20th century. In those days, Congressman, high schools would actually teach courses in Americanism as part of the effort. Can you imagine that today? Is there a high school in America that would even dream of teaching immigrants a class in Americanism?
Well, I mean, what's that old analogy? A culture that doesn't remember its history is doomed to repeat it.
That's right. So I mean, the lack, a huge part of the landscape here is the fact that we do not make adequate efforts to assimilate immigrants.
Right.
Another thing that strikes me about this whole debate, Congressman, is that on rare occasions the Democrats object to spending. Right? Normally, trillions of dollars flow out, and they're happy about all of it, as far as you can tell. But every once in a while, they get cost conscious, and we have one of those situations with respect to the border wall. Now, all of a sudden, they're talking about how much money it's going to cost. What do you make of that?
Well, I heard a number of people make the comment, well, it's going to cost us, $5 billion to do this. Well, the cost to the American public for illegal immigration is over $100 billion annually. So it sounds to me like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And coming from a state like Arizona, where we actually built a wall down in Yuma, where we actually had about a 95% success rate in interdictions, sounds like it actually works. So it seems like to me, if we want to start looking at investments and strategies, building the wall is exactly what we need to do. Just having the look of a deterrent actually helps us. And then enforce the rule of law. I mean, you go back to yesterday in Kamala Harris's conversation with DHS Secretary, about holding people accountable for federal discarding of jurisdictions entrusted to the federal government. I'd love to see a governor arrested. I'd love to see a mayor arrested. I got to tell you, this country was great because everybody had the equal application of the law. Maybe we ought to get back to looking at Hillary and all the wrongdoings that happened in the last administration, but start with some of these erroneous states and cities that are eliciting illegal behavior.
Yeah, you're talking about the sanctuary cities. Yeah, why not arrest a mayor, some city council members, and so forth? That would solve that problem, I suspect, very quickly. We're talking with Congressman Paul Gosar. We got to call them
illegal havens, because sanctuary, I agree with Mark Levin. We give them angelic names, and then everything on the right is devilish.
Dreamers.
That's something else, illegal havens.
Yeah, good point. I got to let you go here, Congressman. We're going to bump up against a break, but let me ask you one last question. We've talked a little bit about the tactics of both sides here and some of the issues that are in play. What do you think is actually going to happen? What's going to come out of the current standoff?
My suggestion, John, is go big and go early. The American people are watching. Are you going to play hostage to this game over and over again? I've been in, this is my fourth term. All I've seen is these CRs, where we actually bend over backwards, and who gets
continuing
stuck with
resolution. CR is continuing resolution. It's a stopgap funding measure. Yeah.
Who gets stuck? The American people, and they're tired of it. They have to do budgets, so should we. Get back to that process. So you can either have this fight now where you've got some leverage and you've got the bully pulpit with the president, or you can wait and subjugate yourself down the road time and time again. It's time to get after this fight. I want the fight now. I want to fund our military for the full year. I want this done, and I want to take names and start calling people out.
All right, Congressman Paul Gosar, thank you for being with us. We're going to run to a break, and we'll be right back after these messages. You're listening to the Laura Ingraham Show, Your Healthy Radio Addiction. I'm John Hinderaker from Powerline, filling in for Laura today. We've been talking mostly about immigration, somewhat about the S-hole controversy, which the Democrats have ginned up, which has dominated the news for the last week. And by the way, to the extent that the Democrats quoting President Trump, likely inaccurately in that manner, has hurt our relations with various foreign countries, that was unpatriotic of them. That was a private meeting, a personal conversation, not intended to be made public, and they knew it was going to damage us in the eyes of certain foreign countries, and they did it anyway. Dick Durbin is not a patriotic American. That was really an underhanded thing to do. We're going to have to run to a break here, and we will be back with more on the Laura Ingraham Show after these messages.
Thanks for listening to the Laura Ingraham Show podcast. Download new episodes every week at podcastone.com. That's podcastone.com.
Hi, this is Ben Domenech, the host of the Federalist Radio Hour. We're a daily show coming to you 5 days a week from Washington, D.C., where we interview our nation's top journalists, politicians, authors, chefs, economists, entertainers, and more. If you're looking for a contrarian discussion on news, politics, or culture, give us a listen and subscribe at podcastone.com, the new Podcast One app, or at Apple Podcasts.